Ladies and gentlemen, hello. It has been a long time since we've seen each other, and I will tell you that I can completely understand any of you who are having trouble with technology during this time. I still do not have a truly working computer from the school at this point, so everything has been delayed and put off and put off. So I'm making this video on a different device that I've been able to acquire, and it will give you access to take that quiz over Ohio government here as soon as I'm done making this, so you can take it anytime between now, which is, what is today, Saturday. I'm having trouble keeping track of the days of the week. Between Saturday and Wednesday, when all grades are going to be due. Um, so let's get started. First thing to know, what we're doing is we're comparing the Constitution that governed the state of Ohio. And you remember, what is a Constitution? And by the way, if you're curious, who is it? It's Brittany, right? What a Constitution does, it's not a list of laws. A Constitution tells how the government works. So in this case, we talk about the Constitution of the United States, and what did the Constitution of the United States say? Well, it said we were going to have a president, and it told us how long our president would serve, how we were going to elect the president, what are his qualifications to be president, and it has a list of things that the president can do. What is, our legislative branch? We call Congress. We have two houses, the House of Representatives and the Senate. The House of Representatives, they serve for 2 years. In the Senate, they serve for 6 years. How are they elected? Well, today we elect all of them. The people of the state or the district elect these people. But originally, the House of Representatives was elected by the people, and the Senate was chosen by state legislatures. That was just the way that it was. It was a separation. It wasn't really a democracy. And the Supreme Court, what can the Supreme Court do? What can they not do? Who can be on the Supreme Court? But what I'm trying to say is that's what the Constitution does. The Constitution tells how things work. Okay, it's not a list of laws. It tells how things work. Well, Ohio back in 1802 we were just a vast wilderness basically, and but we'd met the requirements to become a state, which basically meant that we had enough people living here. I think it was I remember how. I'm going to guess, and I'm going to be wrong, and this will be recorded, and I'll look stupid. But several thousand people. We had to have meet that threshold of several thousand people. Once we hit that, we could write a state constitution. The people living in this territory, the Ohio Territory at that time, could vote for it. Then we could send it to Washington, D.C. for Congress to approve or disapprove. And we wrote this Constitution in 1802, and it was approved, and we became a state in 1803. So that's the beginnings, okay? So that's what we want to know is the difference between that Constitution there and the Constitution of 1851, which is a very, very different Constitution, and we'll see why that was important. So the Constitution of 1802, here's what we did. We understand when it's written in 1802, the thinking of the people that are living at that time in the United States is this: we trust the legislature, we don't trust the president, and we don't trust the Supreme Court. Because we don't trust an executive because we just broke away from a king 30 years earlier, 25 years earlier. We broke away from a king. The Supreme Court is not elected by the people. You and I have no control, really no direct control over who's on the Supreme Court. They serve for life. Once they get on, they're just there. So you get the idea. So we don't trust them, but what we do trust the people in the legislature. Okay, we trust the legislature. In Ohio, our legislature is going to be called the General Assembly. We're going to have the Ohio House and the Ohio Senate. And they're going to be made up of people from different districts, but the districts are going to be different. And that's important, okay? The districts are going to be different. There's going to be more people in the Ohio House than there are in the Ohio Senate, just like there's more people in the U.S. House of Representatives than there are in the U.S. Senate. Okay, we have 100 senators and 435 members of the House. So we trust the legislature. That's important because that's our whole Constitution is based upon us trusting the legislature. So here's what happens. In 1802, we, the people, elected the legislature. That's going to be really important. So we elect the legislature. The General Assembly is going to pick all the judges. Okay, and by the way, there's only really state Supreme Court judges. They're going to be picked by the legislature. They're going to serve for 7 years. So who do the judges answer to? They answer to the legislature. If they want to keep the job, they better do what the legislature tells them to do. Right? The governor we're going to elect also. But the governor has no power. The governor cannot veto laws. All he can do is what the legislature tells him to do. So when you look at it, Ohio had 3 branches of government, just like we have in the United States. But of our 3 branches, whereas at the national level, the branches are considered to be co-equal with each other. In Ohio, that's not the case. In Ohio, the legislature is the most important branch. And why are they the most important branch? They pass all the laws, and the governor can't veto them. Number one. And they also appoint the judges, and there's nothing the judges can do about it. Hopefully we're all understanding that. So the legislature has all the power. Well, one of the laws that's going to be passed is going to be something that's going to become known as the plunder law. The plunder law is going to be some bad news, okay? It's not called the plunder law. When you think about plunder, think about stealing, okay? It's not passed, the legislature didn't pass a law called the plunder law, okay? That's not what happened. That's what it's going to be called by people living at that time. Essentially, and I'm breaking this down for you really, really briefly. Essentially, what this law did, we wanted to have what's called internal improvements for the state of Ohio. Internal improvements would be things like roads and bridges. In today's world, it would include airports, but it was also railroads. And the way that the plunder law worked, and the way it didn't work, the state of Ohio did not build these things. So the state of Ohio did not build roads. The state of Ohio did not build bridges. The state of Ohio did not build any of these things. Private companies did. But we know that roads and bridges and airports and train tracks and we know those things actually help our economy. They help our state, but we didn't want to build it as a government. We did not think that was the role of government. So private companies would build it. But we did think it was okay for the state to help those companies build it. So basically what would happen is if I've got a company and I told the state of Ohio, hey, listen, I want to build a road from Mount Sterling to Columbus, and this is what it's going to cost. The legislature set up this amount of money that said, okay, well, if you're going to build this road, we're going to give you this money up front. And they give me, my company, some money, and maybe I built it, and maybe I didn't. But if I ran out of money, I certainly didn't finish building it. And so what happens is we have all these half-started projects, not fully finished projects, which are good for nothing. And we also have people who have just said they were going to do something that got the money from the state of Ohio and didn't do anything with it. So what's happened is we got all kinds of people, like I did, I guess, in my example, that what they did is they made promises, they got money from the state of Ohio, and then they didn't follow through. So the state of Ohio got no benefit from this. But what they did is they lost a lot of money and they were in a great debt. So the state of Ohio by 1851 is in great debt. Now, couldn't people maybe have seen that this law was a bad deal? It was passed in, I believe, 1835. Shouldn't people have known that? Well, maybe somebody would have. Maybe the governor at the time didn't like it, but the governor had no power. It all came back to the legislature. By the time you get to 1851, you see Ohio is in great debt. We're almost bankrupt. Our legislature, who we thought was going to do a great job ruling us, doing because we vote for them, so they have to listen to us. Well, they didn't listen to us. That's just, unfortunately, that's not the way that it always works in government. So by the time we get to 1851, the state of Ohio is in some trouble. So we are going to rewrite our Constitution for the state of Ohio. Back in, we're talking about a second issue. And before I go to the second issue, I want to mention how much debt was the state of Ohio in? In their money, in the 1840s, Ohio was $20 million in debt. That's not in today's money. That's in the money in the 1840s. So you can imagine Ohio is absolutely broke because of this plunder law. A second issue, maybe a third issue, I'm giving all kinds of issues here. Another issue that Ohio is going to deals with our court system. When Ohio first became a state, we were small. We didn't have very many people. We had no laws, right? No laws, because we weren't a state yet. We hadn't passed any laws. So when we first become a state, we've got no laws. We didn't need very many judges. So we only had a Supreme Court. The rule was that the Supreme Court had to travel, because we believe in America, we believe in a local trial. So if a crime happens here in Madison County, we should have a trial that happens here in Madison County. And that was our rule. So how are we going to do that? Well, the only way we could do that was for the Supreme Court to travel to every county. So essentially, the Supreme Court, we have 88 counties in Ohio. The Supreme Court had to travel to all 88 counties once a year. So if a crime happens, if the Supreme Court's here and meets in London today, and a crime happens tomorrow, there's not going to be a trial until at least a year from now. So we see that's a little bit of a problem, but that's the situation we have in Ohio. So our Supreme Court judge, and by the way, can you imagine what happens when Ohio's population doubles and doubles again and doubles again? By the 1850s, and we have tons of laws now. So we have tons of laws, we have tons of people, we have tons of court cases, and here's the Supreme Court is moving all over the place. They can't keep up. So we're going to have to solve that problem. Okay, so we're broke. Our legislature has done some dumb things. And by the way, I should mention two more things that the legislature has done. And they didn't do it because they were told they could do it. They did it because they weren't told they could not do it. And that's what people didn't understand about the legislature. They thought the legislature would do only what they were allowed to do. But they did. They did anything that it wasn't said they couldn't do. One thing that they did is they passed laws that favored specific people or specific businesses. And that's called privileges. So if you have ever heard, well, driving's not a right, it's a privilege, or something from your parents along those words about something being a privilege, well, that means that you don't have a right to it. We're giving you this because we can. Well, the state of Ohio was giving people or businesses specific, special favoritism, I guess. What would that favoritism be? Well, maybe we don't make one business pay taxes. Or we lower one person's taxes. We also don't tax things in a uniform rate where we're saying, well, okay, this is the value of this property is going to be the same value all over the state of Ohio. We're not necessarily doing that, so it's not the same. When I say uniform, if you wear a uniform, you match everybody else, right? Everybody's wearing the same thing. You're all wearing a uniform. That's what it is. Well, if it's a uniform rate, then everybody's being taxed at the same rate for what they have, what they buy. That's not what was happening in Ohio. So privileges. Another problem, again, the Constitution of 1802 didn't say we could do this, but it didn't say our Ohio General Assembly could not. And that is, they were passing what's called retroactive laws. Now, in our Constitution of the United States, that's called an ex post facto law. And ex post facto means after the fact. So since Ohio isn't told they're not allowed to do that, our General Assembly is. What does that mean? It means you could do something that's not illegal. The General Assembly, later on, makes it illegal, passes a law to make whatever you already did illegal, and then you get in trouble for it. But wait, it wasn't illegal when I did it. But it doesn't matter. It's illegal now, and you shouldn't have done it. And we know that sounds so stupid, but that's what was happening. So why did the General Assembly do it? They abused their power. What can we learn about this? Well, absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? That's what we can learn from all this. All feeling good? All right, hopefully we're getting all this. All right, so 1851 comes around, and it's actually 1848, and Ohio's broke, and we're going to have to make some changes. So what are we going to do by the time 1851 rolls around? Well, we're going to make some changes. We're going to write a new constitution, 1848, that's going to go to all the people to approve. One thing we're going to do is we're going to keep three branches of government. We still today have three branches of government. Change number 2. Our judges, because they were being elected or chosen by the General Assembly, our judges were not necessarily people that should be chosen as judges. So we're going to change it. We think that our General Assembly had screwed this whole thing up. So we are going to now have the people in the state of Ohio elect judges. And that's the way that it still is today. All right, next problem. Remember the problem that we have the Supreme Court. They're moving around all over 88 counties a year, right, trying to hear court. The problem is we did not have circuit court or district courts. So what we're going to do is we're going to make district courts. So that's an easy solution. So 1802, no district courts. 1851, we've got district courts. 1802, the Supreme Court moves all over the place. 1851, the Supreme Court's going to stay right put in the state capitol in Columbus, which is where it's at today. Three branches of government then, three branches of government now. All good? All right. Next thing. And these are easy things to fix. Next thing, remember privileges? I told you that they were able to pass laws that favored certain people or certain businesses. In our new Constitution of 1851, I'm saying new and it's 1851, but our new Constitution of 1851, no privileges. All right, that's easy. What about those retroactive laws that our legislature passed and saying, hey, you know, this wasn't illegal, but it is now? Well, we're going to ban those too. Okay. All right. Next big problem. Ohio is in such great debt. I told you, Ohio is in debt of $20 million in that money. I should have looked up what would $20 million be in 2020 money. I don't know, but it'd be an awful lot more than $20 million. We're going to limit our state debt to $750,000. So we might get in debt, but $750,000 is a far cry from $20 million. And that's been changed today, of course. It's been up and down. You get the idea. Ohio right now currently has to have a budget, an even budget every year. Tax rate's going to be the same. And one more thing with taxes that's going to be important. But people by 1852, I think hopefully you realize this, 1851, I hope you realize people no longer trust the legislature as much as they did. So we're going to do one more big change. And we're going to say, if the legislature wants to pass a law that's going to raise your taxes and raise my taxes, if they want to pass a law, we're not saying they can't do it. But they have to say in that law, what is the purpose of that tax going to be used for? And then it has to be spent according to those purposes. So those are some major changes from 1802 to 1851. I'm going to pause this and I'm going to make sure there's nothing else that I'm missing that you need to know here. One last thing I'll talk to you about. How do we change Ohio's constitution? We see this quite a bit actually in the state of Ohio. There's three things we can do. I'm saying change the Constitution. I shouldn't have said that. How do we change things in Ohio as you and me, voters, not members of the General Assembly? Well, number one, we have the power to pass a law that the legislature doesn't pass, and that's called an initiative. Okay, initiative, like taking initiative, taking charge. We have the power to get rid of a law that they pass that we don't like. That's called a referendum. And the third thing we have the power to do is we have the power to pass a state constitutional amendment, even if the General Assembly doesn't want to. So we'll pause that right now. There's powers that we the people have. Let's go back. The 1852 Constitution gave our General Assembly power to pass a state constitutional amendment themselves. And how they would do it is 3/5 of the House would vote yes. That's 60% of the House votes yes. 60% of the Ohio Senate votes yes. Then it comes to the people. We, the people, always get to decide the final say when it comes to a constitutional amendment because we, the people, are the ones who passed our Constitution in the first place, so we are the only ones who can change it. So if they propose a constitutional amendment, we get to decide yes or no. Okay? By the way, also, another power that the governor is eventually going to get, I believe it's 1912. You don't have to know the date, but I believe it's around 1912. The governor of Ohio actually got the power to veto laws, so he got a lot more power that way. Today, the governor has even more power because we gave him the power to do something called a line item veto. And a line item veto is the General Assembly passes a law and it comes to the governor's desk and he likes all of it but one thing. He can veto one line and the rest of it becomes, that's a pretty powerful tool. You may not think it's a big tool, but it's a big tool because sometimes the only reason that a bill passed is because it contained that one line in it. So we gave our governor all kinds of power. Today our governor's pretty powerful, as we've seen, right? We're not in school, not because of the General Assembly, but because of the governor. And I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm not saying he's right. I'm telling you, we're not in school because of the power the governor has. All these people, the businesses that were shut down, they were shut down by the health department, but on the order of the governor. Why did the governor have that power? Because our General Assembly gave him that power. They created the possibility for things like this to happen for the governor to be able to take control, and he has. Our governor today is really powerful, and we can tell. We're living proof. Look around you, right? The governor of Ohio is a pretty powerful guy. We created that, and personally, I may think our governor is doing a great job, but he's really powerful, and he's doing things that the Constitution didn't necessarily say he could do. State Constitution, of course. He's doing things that the General Assembly said he's allowed to do. General Assembly took their power and they gave it to him, and he's using it. So we've given our governor powers. So let's go back to the way that we, the people, can take care of things. Okay, if there's a law, the General Assembly passes a law that we don't like, we can get rid of it. It's called a referendum. We can repeal that law. If they will not pass a law that we want them to pass, we can write it out. It's called an initiative. The third thing we can do is we can write out a state constitutional amendment. They're very, very similar in how they all work. But a constitutional amendment is more powerful than creating a new law. Because if we pass a law initiative, that means Jason Hunt, I write a law. I have to go around and get signatures of people that sign saying they agree this should be on the ballot. And if I get enough signatures of people to agree this should be on the ballot, then all the people in the state of Ohio vote. And if it gets a majority, it passes. But it's a law, right? And if it's a law, then as soon as it passes, the General Assembly could pass another law to get rid of that law that just passed. I might think that would be stupid for them to do because the people of Ohio just passed that law, but they could still do it. So initiative's not used very often these days. Referendum's not used a lot. Referendum has been used effectively in the state of Ohio fairly recently, but not a lot. The one that's used most of the time is a constitutional amendment. And the most recent constitutional amendment that you would have maybe known a little bit about that failed was the marijuana initiative, making marijuana legal in the state of Ohio. And we had a group that tried to do this again. Unfortunately, trying to collect signatures during a pandemic is very difficult. So I'm going to walk you through the process of how to pass a state constitutional amendment, and then we'll break the numbers down for everything else, because that's the one you're going to see the most in your life. Number one, here's what has to happen. Somebody has to write out exactly what that constitutional amendment should say. Exactly. Once you get the language of it, you send it, and it's approved at the state. I think Secretary of State approves it. Might be the Attorney General. See, I'm losing my mind here there next time. But we said it gets approved. That language is written off, signed off on, saying, okay, it's fine. Once that language that's been written out is approved, it comes back to the group that wants to get this new constitutional amendment to pass. Here's how many signatures they have to have. You look at the last, and this is a weird name, gubernatorial election. That means the last time we elected the governor in the state of Ohio, who we elected Mike DeWine. When we elected Mike DeWine in 2018, how many votes were cast? That changes every time we have a governor's election. Total votes cast. Not how many votes did he get. How many people voted in that election? Once we know that number, which we can get that number by doing a quick Google search, right? Once we get that number, we know the number of signatures we have to collect are 10% of that number. Okay? So we know that's a lot. 10% is a lot of people. And it doesn't have to be the same people, right? If I didn't vote for governor, I could still sign the petition, right? But you have to be 18 to sign the petition. Okay, so, but you got to get 10% of the people, whether they vote or not, it doesn't matter, but you have to get 10%. Now, there's one more small little detail that we have to get. Ohio has 88 counties. Whoever's collecting signatures has to make sure that, let's say Madison County, let's say 10,000 people voted in an election, probably in Madison County. Let's just say 10,000 people voted in Madison County last time we elected a governor. We have to get 5% of that number of whoever voted in Madison County. We have to get 5% of that number in Madison County to check us off the list. If we get that, we have to do the same thing in 43 more counties. So what am I saying? We have to collect half of that number, 5%, in at least 44 counties of the 88. So really, you can't focus on just Madison County because we're not super populated. Because even though we might get 5% of Madison County, it might be easier to do than 5% of Franklin County, which is huge and lots more people. It's our biggest county. But we're still going to need to collect people's signatures in Franklin County also, because we need to get 10% of the total. So 5% in 44 of 88 counties. So that means that it's a broad deal. People around the whole state, not just one part of the state, want us to do this. That's number one. And number two, we got to get a certain number of signatures. So that's for state constitutional amendment. If they get that, then they turn those signatures in, Secretary of State. Secretary of State, they check them, make sure these are actual people in the state of Ohio. And you got to figure some people are not going to be eligible to vote, or they're not going to be residents of the state of Ohio, or they're going to give a fake address or something. Those signatures are all tossed out. So if you're trying to get a constitutional amendment passed, like the people were trying to get recreational marijuana on the ballot for this November, they didn't get enough signatures, so it was tossed. Okay, doesn't mean they're not going to try again, but it was tossed. They're not going to get it this time. Hopefully that makes sense. They didn't get enough signatures. So they're probably going to try it again. So, but long story, you want to get more signatures than you need. Once you get the signatures, if we get enough, then in the next November, that next election, that is when the people of Ohio are going to decide yes or no on whether this amendment's going to pass. All right. So, break it down now. If it's a constitutional amendment, that's the hardest thing to change, 10%. If the government passes a law that we don't like, we want to get rid of it, it's called referendum, we have to get 6%. So 10% for constitutional amendment, 6% for a referendum. What if it is a initiative? We just want to pass a law that our General Assembly won't. Well, that's going to take 3%. It's the easiest one to get on. Again, just because we get 3% doesn't mean it's going to pass, because it's all those things are going to be on the election. It's going to be on the ballot in November for all the people to vote on. Okay. All right, that's enough. So hopefully that clears everything up for you. Watch this video, take that quiz again. You will take your best grade, and we'll be pretty satisfied with it. I hope you guys are all staying healthy and things are going well, and we'll catch you soon.